Hey, everybody. Welcome to week 124 of the Crazy Train weekly webinar with the infamous Adam Boatsman, Jack Santinello, and now we've got Russell Hughes, which is awesome. So here's the deal. You guys know the deal, but I will remind you just in case you haven't learned in the last 123 weeks. Use the Q&A to hit us with questions. You can harass us with the chat. And oh, you know what? I am going to go in before Papa Joe hits me and says, chat is disabled. I'm on to you, Joe. So also, I'm going to share real quick before Jack does an update, because you guys, the way that this is set up, I believe, is you don't see anybody unless they're speaking. So you don't know. Joe is on. Actually, the chat is working. Yes, because about 3 nanoseconds ago, I just hit it. But thanks, Joe. It would not be the same without you. But because the way that Zoom is set up, you don't know what Russell Hughes looks like. And the other thing is you don't know how freaking tall he is. He's like 7 feet tall. So I'm going to share a picture that proves this from 8 years ago. Can you see that? See, he's 8 feet tall. And we are wearing the exact same shirts as 5 years ago when we were at this event. Man. So anyway, he's an expert in commercial real estate, and he's got a lot of working knowledge. Came here from Los Angeles via University of Michigan. Do not hold that against him. I don't. I've gotten past it. So anyway, Jack, I know you've got some things from Capitol Hill, I'm sure, things that you want to share. So take it away.
Of course. So not to steal any of Adam's thunder as far as the details, I'll give you kind of like some topical stuff. So the quick history. So as everybody knows, but maybe not the details, the bill that had passed in the Senate passed in the House, and the vote was 220 to 207, with 4 Republicans not voting. And as expected, every Democrat voted in support. Articles that you see, depending again on which channel you're watching or what news article you're reading and the source of it, back and forth, whether, people were yelling and screaming, clapping and applauding, or yelling and screaming that we're all getting ripped off. So one of the interesting things was the $80 billion to the IRS. And if you guys remember, Andrew was a non-gunslinging IRS agent. So he's on the civil side, not the criminal side. And he shared with me an article that basically was the justification for the $80 billion to the IRS. Things like how they staple and unstaple and restaple stuff together as they process it. If your tax return has one small error, that gets literally and physically pulled out of the pile and processed. Everything is done in paper. The operating system is Cobalt with monochrome screens. And I'm not kidding. I mean, that is what has been going on at the IRS. And so we wonder why we're not getting our checks. We wonder why, there's these issues with the IRS and the SBA, because I mean, they literally, they're talking alien talk to each other, in different foreign languages kind of thing. So in other news, and I'll come back to the act in a moment, but I saw this article about there's pressure building. There's $180 million in unused funds in the Restaurant Revitalization Fund. And there are people on Capitol Hill that are pushing to get that deployed. There's also a slush fund for litigation. And then apparently some people were in fact scared when the warnings came out as to you better not have done these things and taken the money inappropriately. So they gave some money back to the tune of several millions of dollars. So there's money there. So there's still, if you're in that industry, and I know a lot of people several people who watch this are in the hospitality industry that may be impacted by that. So there may be an opportunity to reach into the fund, but any efforts to try to put more money into that fund are passed. So, and then lastly, some things that, and I found an article that some things that are not in the budget reconciliation process. So in this bill, was increasing the corporate tax rate from its current 21% to 28%. Increasing, and these are things that are, make sure these are things that are not in there. I'm not trying to create a panic and like, oh my gosh, this is what happened. We didn't realize that happened as we were sleeping. So did not happen. Increasing the top marginal income tax rate from 39.6 to 39.6 from 37. A surcharge tax of 5% to 8% on high income individuals. That's different than this other tax we're talking about for high income or for companies that reach a certain revenue point. And then it's totally tangential, had seen that someone stated that 15% tax only affects maybe 150 companies. I think I misread that. That just doesn't seem possible. But and then there's other things, top capital gains rates. Some proposals were going from 20 to 25%, taxing unrealized capital gains by eliminating the ability to step up basis and appreciated property upon death of the owner, carried interest provisions. So a lot of things did not make it into there. And that is why there was some of these things were the things that prevented it from going forward on the Democrat side that were conceded to in one form or fashion. So, and as we talked about last week, there was, I believe, a lot of back scratching and promises, pay it forward, as some people will call it. So yeah, I'm with you as long as you promise that when this comes around next time that you're going to go in this direction rather than that direction. And so, so that's it. That's a quick summary of what's happened in the past 7 days or so.
Well, Chewbacca was quite excited about money going back into the restaurant revitalization fund because Adam and I tried to have dinner one night at some restaurant, and Chewbacca was with us, and we spent most of the time chasing Chewbacca.
That's right. Until finally somebody said, "Can I hold your dog?" And I'm like, "Hell yeah, you can." It's like, oh my. Yeah, so I appreciate the opening there, to kind of piggyback on some of Jack's comments, specifically around the tax changes and the IRS enforcement piece. I mean, there all this stuff about, oh my gosh, they're going to get all this money, it's a guarantee you're going to get audited, Gary. I need people to understand like what it's like to deal with an audit now. First off, as Jack's colleague confirmed, several webinars ago, pretty much going to be mostly, random chance that you get audited. So I don't see the percentage of audits really going up, in terms of what they publish that they're going to do, every year. But here's what happens when you get audited now. When you get audited now, I get a letter. And you get a letter, and then we get an information request from the IRS, and then we provide that information, and then 1 year later they get around to scheduling something, and then 6 months later they get around to actually doing something with the information they gathered during our scheduled appointment, and then 1 year later I get a frantic phone call from the agent that says, "Hey, my boss is on my ass to close this case. Can we get together? I need to talk to you about a few items." That whole process used to take about 6 months. We have not had an audit close at BGW in less than 3 years. So, I mean, all of us in the business, I know, somebody's going to put on the chat, "Oh, you only like it because your fee's going to go up." No, like we trust me, IRS audits for us is a lost freaking leader. Meaning like we don't charge at all what it really takes to get to the audit, because I feel bad about it, because Gary's pointed out several times, our record is pretty much undefeated with the IRS. So we look at it as kind of a waste of your money, since our clients typically don't have a whole lot to hide. That being said, what a pain in the ass it is to get, have to deal with letters from their automated response system. And, if you're the client, you don't have any closure on the issue. I mean, despite how many times I tell you, you're not going to go to jail over this, you're still like, God, they're going to show up at my door one day and, lock me up. So it's like, that's great. The second piece of this is, in other words, hiring more agents so we can actually close some freaking files, that'd be fabulous, if we get that done. And then I think the second piece that, I look at on the revenue side is that, again, our clients typically don't have anything to hide based on our track record of successful defenses of people that are audited within our client base. That being said, the generally accepted compliance rate is about 80%. So if you just extrapolate that's how they're getting this paid for, is that if you extrapolate, only 80% of people are paying the taxes that they should pay. That is the funding mechanism primarily. But if you dip into that 20% that's not paying, loopholes and taking advantage of the tax code, pretty small part. I'm talking about just flat out didn't file a freaking tax return, or, my bank account shows that I had $3 million in deposits in it, but I'm only putting $50 on my tax return. Like, that's what non-compliance really looks like in terms of what they're going after, not, I don't know, I had a dinner with Jack. I mean, oh my God, are they going to disallow the dinner that I had with Jack because I didn't, write down what the conversation was actually about? No, that's not what they're looking for. They're looking for, the people that are sort of to the point with PPP and ERTC that Jack and the Restaurant Revitalization Fund that Jack was talking about at the beginning. It's like flat out fraud, meaning like, it's amazing that your business, never had payroll until you filled out that first application, for money. And then suddenly you've got $5 million in payroll for the purposes of defrauding the government when you've had $1 in gross receipts. That's what that's going to be welcome in my world, because it in my opinion, it'll actually take the heat off the people that are actually doing the right thing. So that's generally a positive. When it comes to tax rate change, I did have some questions around, again, so that was one piece of the commentary that's just heated on both sides of the aisle. The other piece of the commentary that's heated on both sides of the aisle, and I think, Russell could have some commentary on this too, just talking about real estate, is that, oh my gosh, tax rates, they're going to hit this. This is a tax rate increase on corporations. It's 15%. It's a tax rate increase. That, again, the corporate tax right now is at 21%. So we're talking about a minimum tax of at least 15%, adjusting for, preference type items, targeting, 150 companies, to Jack's point. That really is kind of true, actually, because the companies that they're targeting, I think we've published this at least on some webinar links before, Nike, Salesforce, Duke Energy, these are big blue chip companies that show accounting profit on their financial statements for the purpose, like their price to earnings ratio, if you go look at it on Yahoo Finance right now, is not like -5 to 1, but are they reporting taxable income? No, they're not. Perfectly legal that they're reporting no taxable income, but they're not reporting taxable income, even though they're reporting significant profits on their financial statements, which is why their stock price is what their stock price is. What they're talking about is making sure companies like Duke Energy, pay some tax instead of Duke Energy's current situation, which is it would take, over 50 years for them to bleed down how much they deferred in taxes up to this point. If they just said no more deferrals going forward, I'm going to pay whatever I'm going to pay, it would take 50 years and I'm going to double that. It would take them 50 years to bleed off what they've already accumulated in terms of depreciation benefit, tax credits, credits for investing in energy and alternative fuel and all that kind of stuff. So, with Salesforce, it's more like, stock incentive plans for executives, that's what's creating them not having taxable income at this point, and the research and development credit, all great stuff. But so I don't necessarily view that as a horrible item either. But the question that I've been asked is that, if tax rates go up about 21%, it's like that is a legitimate argument that we will not be competitive with foreign jurisdictions anymore. True statement. But the question that I got asked, and I'll shut up and actually get to the prime time of the program, is that, oh my gosh, businesses are not going to spend any more money because they're getting no more tax benefit, no more depreciation, no more spending money. Well, the debate really was, do I get to expense, a couple $1 million right up front, or do I get to expense it over 5 to 7 years, which was the old depreciation rule. So the thing that I would like to point out is that without some sort of trigger from Congress to do something, those accelerated depreciation benefits are set to phase out and expire. So they were going away anyway. This just accelerates them going away anyway, unless there was action to extend them. And secondly, this is where I would say, there's probably a real estate opinion on this, because I've heard it from real estate related people before. I definitely, have heard it from people that buy equipment. Like, nobody buys a multi-million-dollar piece of machinery because of the tax deduction. That just affects the timing of when they do it. Either before the end of the year or after the end of the year. But you don't buy the freaking piece of equipment unless you generally believe that you've got the sales to support it, or it's otherwise going to increase your efficiency such that you're going to make more money off of it. Like nobody went out and said, like, think about how stupid this is. I'm going to spend $2 million to save $400,000 in taxes, but I'm never going to get a return on that $2 million, but I sure did save some taxes. That makes 0 sense. So all that depreciation does is it just accelerates the payback a little bit that you were going to get anyway, but you were going to get it. Like, nobody's going to make a decision. Nobody's going to make a rational decision on an investment based on the tax benefit. So where that showed up in real estate is, when the qualified opportunity zones came out as an option, the people that we talked to, at least, it was around, oh my gosh, great tax benefit, blah, blah. The feedback that I heard was all it did is it made a deal that we were going to do anyway a little bit better. That's really all this does. It makes a deal that you were going to do a little bit better, but I was still going to do the deal. Just made it a little bit better, and maybe I did it a little bit faster than I was otherwise planning on doing it. This depreciation thing's the same way. So do I think that it's going to slow down investment? Not permanently, maybe a little, but I think decreased consumer demand is what's going to reduce investment, not the tax code. So with that in mind, I will shut up. Tie right in it, Gary.
Woo, baby. That was good. Yeah. That was good.
All right, I'm on a roll.
We need to have you kind of come out of your shell and form an opinion every once in a while, though.
Yeah.
I need another beer.
Yeah.
Finish my beer. I need another one.
Right.
Well, Russell Hughes, what we would love to do is have you give us a little kind of state of the union, what you're seeing out there from a commercial real estate standpoint, stuff that you think might be beneficial for somebody contemplating leasing, up in their lease, or their lease is coming due. What should they do? Not everybody's back in the office. What do I do? Should I try to lease part of that? Should we be buying? What should we be doing? Because there's a lot of folks on this line that do have commercial real estate holdings, and everybody's leasing if they aren't owner occupied. So take it away, Russell.
Well, thank you all for having me. Adam, I just kind of want to piggyback on what you just talked about related to 1031s. Every time a new piece of tax legislation comes out, everyone freaks out in the real estate world about 1031s. And I would argue that now is a wonderful time to pay taxes, because I would venture to guess that they are much more likely to get rid of the stepped up basis than they are the 1031. And everyone forgets that 1031 is just a deferral. So But in the pre-show, if there was such a thing, Adam asked, why on earth commercial real estate is so damn expensive? Why isn't it coming down? Why didn't it get the memo? And when you look at residential is probably down. Now, it's not down. Everything's relative. It's down from its high, from its peak, probably 12 to 15% in Charlotte and considerably more in other markets. So why isn't commercial matching up with that? And the reality is there are trillions of dollars chasing real estate right now. And the interest rates have not really, they're not comparable. You can still get a loan in the 4s on commercials, and you're probably looking at a 5.5, creeping up towards a 6 on the residential side for a mortgage. So there is still the uncertainty in the stock market, in equities, and uncertainty in the markets in general. The money hasn't gone anywhere. There's still trillions of dollars trying to be deployed for some kind of return and to hedge against the inflation. And hard assets have always been a traditional outflow for that. So the money's kind of flowing into real estate. That said, the asset classes are different. Office is still pretty beat up. I mean, I just saw that Netflix, my old client, put about a third of their headquarters in Los Gatos up for sublease today. It's pretty big. I mean, obviously Netflix stock has been beat up pretty badly, but I don't think Netflix and chill is going away anytime soon. So the fact that they're putting 90,000 square feet of space in Los Gatos on the market is telling. Retail is an interesting thing. Strip mall retail is actually going up. The rents are going up. Power centers, it's coming down. So there's the tale of two cities. I put out a video yesterday on LinkedIn talking about hotels. Everyone's got happy feet related to hotels. They're like, hotels travels back. I don't know. Anyone who's had their flight canceled in the last couple of months might be reticent to get on a plane again. And I don't think business travel is coming back anytime soon to where it was. I think everyone's gotten used to Zoom. I think business travel is going to pick up, but I don't think it's ever going to get back to where it was. So there are just the market, and that's it. The industrial market is still going absolutely bonkers. The numbers that I've heard is we need to build 500 million square feet per annum for the next 10 years just to unwind just-in-time delivery systems and deal with e-commerce. So that is a huge amount, and all the normal places are gone. All the easy sites are gone. So we're gonna start getting into secondary, tertiary, lots of hair on them locations to build out all that industrial. So that'll be very interesting. But as far as the uncertainty, so the good news for if you own your real estate and you're looking at the economy and you're wondering what's coming, what's happening, there's something called a sale leaseback, and it's exactly what it sounds. You literally sell your property and you lease it back. And there's effectively very little, disruption to your day-to-day operations. But because there's still a ton of investors out there looking for real estate, you can still get a very good price for commercial real estate right now. Have the dry powder, be prepared to go through whatever comes, and you lease back, and no one in your employees, none of your staff, no one knows what just happened. It's kind of a private matter. But then you have all this money suddenly to offset things. Now, going back to the 1031, do you have to pay taxes on that? Yeah, either you need to find a replacement property or you have to pay taxes on it. Replacement properties are, it depends on what your flavor is. But that might be a good option for someone looking at the uncertainty of what's coming in the next couple of years and thinking dry powder might be a good thing. On the leasing side, on the office side, in 2008, we learned so many lessons about how to handle what is coming and the market conditions that we find ourselves in. The Class A+ office market is still very hot, but the suburban office market has cooled off considerably. So say you're happy where you are, you're happy with your footprint, you're happy with pretty much everything. You're 2.5 years into a 5-year lease. Now is actually a reasonably good time to approach the landlord about extending for a new 5-year lease, because you can reset your base year. And for those of you who don't know, your base year is basically the benchmark for what operating expenses are passed through. So if you reset your base year to the inflated expenses of now, then your additional increases are based on that base year, not 2 years ago when prices were a lot cheaper. So you can effectively get rid of some of those pass-throughs just by renewing your lease. And landlords are looking to do deals. They're looking to stabilize. In some cases, they're running into conflicts with their mortgages and all the covenants related to those mortgages. So very similar to 2008. The key is communication, and the key is figuring out what you need and identifying if there is a problem. Because for people looking to shed space right now, it's really challenging. I mean, there was an article 2 weeks ago that Charlotte sublease market for office space is higher than it's ever been. So getting rid of that space is going to be it's potential discount. So
interesting. So got a question that came in from Joe, and I've asked him for a little bit more context, but he's okay, cool. What about flex space, combo office with warehouse in the 15 to 25 square feet?
I'm guessing that's 1,000.
Yeah, I would think so.
It depends. The concentric circles around Charlotte have always been interesting. There is significant fall off, and now Gaston County is actually hotter than Charlotte. So if you want to be on the center core, a lot of those flex spaces are being used for last mile because they don't have as high clear height. But you can ground stack the heck out of them. You can pull vans up to the load-in door or the drive-in door, load them up, drive them out, and do last mile all day long. The further you get out in those circles around Charlotte, the better the rates are going to be, and the better the vacancy rates are going to be. That said, I was just doing that exact search this morning for a client that I was talking to yesterday, and there was 20 options in the $12 to $15 square foot mark.
Cool. Just out of curiosity, Russell, I'm assuming you are not a qualified intermediary on 1031. Is that a fair assumption, or are you?
I am not. I've got some people that I work with that I recommend that are very good at it. I try to stay in my lane.
Yeah. Well, we had Matt Linville on here before.
Yeah. That's one of my recommendations.
Yeah, he's really good. So anybody in that 1031 consideration set, and one, so I was just with a business owner a week ago who's got a strip center, has a willing buyer as is, it's in the couple million range. And the seller is wanting to put the brakes on it a little bit or tap them a little bit just to make sure that he can find and do what he needs to do because of that 45-day window, right? If somebody's in that kind of a situation, what are some things that you've seen, Russell, that actually can work for both parties on a willing and interested buyer as well as seller, and they both are sensitive to the fact that this individual and this property was done through a 1031 exchange, so he's kind of hanging out there with some liability if he doesn't do another 1031?
Well, normally when money goes hard, it's one-sided. Whoever the buyer is has used up their due diligence time and their deposit or their earnest money deposit goes hard. It means it's non-refundable. So sometimes what you can do is you can make that bilateral to extend the contract when it's the seller who's trying to extend that contract. Also, I don't know if Matt talked about it, but there's something called a reverse 1031, where basically it just gets flipped on its head. Because a lot of times the problem with 1031s is that ticking clock. Is you sometimes wind up with people that are so desperate to offset those taxes or to defer those taxes that they wind up doing a deal that they would never do before because they just get up against it, and especially in this market with returns being so compressed and with the competition and the amount of money chasing deals. You don't want to be pressed into a corner where you're doing a deal that you wouldn't do otherwise. Going back to the opportunity zones. Yeah, opportunity zones were not a panacea for anything. They were just a way to defer, to get tax-free money into a deal. And then of course, the timing was interesting because people didn't realize that really by the time you get in and out of the deal, you're talking about closer to 12 to 15 years. And so you have to have money that you can sit on for that length of time. 1031 exchanges are the same thing. You might be better off just paying the taxes. So I know no one wants to do that. I know that it's antithetical to real estate investment 101, but it's not like taxes are going down.
Can you give us the Cliff's Notes on a reverse 1031?
I cannot. That's why Matt Linville exists in my life.
So,
all right.
What
Google it, and if anybody needs to reach Matt Linville, let us know, and we'll connect you to Matt Linville.
I think a lot of us are, kind of BGW included, are in the boat of, look, I'm pretty confident I don't need the footprint that I have now, and at the same time, I kind of want to get preemptive, especially if there is kind of a downturn. What do you recommend people do in those scenarios where it's like, look, I'm pretty confident I don't need the footprint that I have now, but I need something, how do you, the typical, being a user of space, here's the typical response. Well, for the unamortized value of the tenant upfit that we gave you, plus, 95% of your remaining lease term, absolutely will let you out of the space when they can get twice the price for it. In other words, like I want to go,
very generous.
You're paying me to get me out.
Do I get a commission for that?
Yeah, seriously. So it's like, because you always get this, the space is going to be vacant, we don't know if we're going to rent it. It's so much risk. You're going to have to get somebody up. Like they're going to have to get somebody upfit on my space anyway when they moved out. So trying to charge me for the upfit, they're going to have to give Jack that they were going to have to do anyway just to market the space is BS. So how do you recommend those dialogues happen, and kind of what are you seeing in the negotiation space right now?
Well, this is going to be very self-serving, but do not do it yourself. Get a broker involved. If a broker's not involved, then you are a captive tenant. You're not really serious. You're not really serious about putting all options on the table. It's the same thing with a lease for renewal or renegotiation. If you don't have a broker, you're not looking in the market, you're not really serious, and they're going to treat you like a captive tenant. That said, like I said, 2008 was extremely educational. We started getting tools where we could figure out what the mortgage was, when the mortgage was up for renewal, whether or not their ratio was on the right side of their covenants, because banks are looking at this and they're like, okay, we're not going through that again. And to the bank's credit, the loan to value ratios that they were willing to lend on and the risks that they were willing to take did go down precipitously. So it's not as bad. But having a conversation with a landlord. So one of the things that I tell people when they're talking about hiring me is a lot of people don't want to be the pit bull. They either are friends with their landlord or friends with the broker, or they're friends, or they've got a reputation for being a nice person, or they see him at church, or whatever the case is. They don't want to be the heavy, which is why I exist. I worked in New York and LA. I represented Fortune 100 clients. I am the heavy. I mean, you've seen the picture that Gary put up at the beginning. I am the damn heavy. I give you plausible deniability. Your landlord calls and says, what is up with your broker? He's out of control. He's making threats. He's calling my bank. He's doing all sorts of crazy stuff. Like, oh my God, I can't believe he's doing that. And then you send me a text and say, keep it up. It's not dissimilar to having a lawyer. It's plausible deniability. The other thing that I would suggest is sit down. Don't ever use an axe to solve a scalpel problem. One of the biggest problems that I think people are going to have in the next 2 years is they're going to sublease space or terminate space with the landlord, to your point, Adam, at an extreme discount that really didn't get them anywhere. Then they're going to realize that their culture cannot exist remotely. And they're going to want people back in the office at least a couple of days a week. And then they're going to realize that they can no longer cram people in like sardines. And so the square foot per person is going to go up. And the net effective is going to wind up that they're at the same place. So rather than have a conversation with the landlord that says, I want to give you back space, instead, I need help over the next 12 months. And I'm willing to give you something on the backside of my lease to offset that. Then you've got a scalpel solution as opposed to an axe solution. Because I can't think of anything worse than dumping space at a discount and buying it back at a premium. So it's important to identify the problem accurately and get everyone at the table and really analyze your culture and whether or not it can survive remotely.
You bring up a great point on culture. You know, especially what we've seen the last almost 2.5 years now. It's been 2 years and 5 months since we've had to go remote and all that, at least for those of us that could, right? But, you know, week 124, but who's counting? So,
Joe, I was a Teamster. I'm available to intimidate people in all sorts of walks of life.
Yeah, and Joe, he is a qualified arms dealer. So just so you know.
I'm a very scary man in my off time.
Yeah, and I'm 6 feet. No, I'm kidding. So anyway, no, I'm not a 5'8".
Yeah, maybe in your high heels, but yeah. you ain't no 6 feet.
No.
Yeah.
What Gary does in his off time is none of your business.
Oh, but anyway, what I was saying is that the impact of culture and thinking about that, especially having gone through the Great Resignation, and now we're also experiencing the Great Regret, but you know, it's still a big deal. That is a competitive advantage or disadvantage if you don't pay attention to it. So I'm glad you brought that up.
I was tracking that pretty closely during COVID, because obviously, I mean, if there's a permanent 20%, 30%, 50% reduction in office space, that affects my bottom line directly. And I think the most interesting pattern that I noticed is it wasn't whether or not you were remote or in the office that made the difference. It was making the damn decision. The people were losing, people were getting headhunted so aggressively. And the people that were losing the most people were people that just wouldn't make a call one way or another. So I would argue that office space is very important from the intangible things. The overhearing someone is pursuing a business that you have a direct relationship with, that if you guys didn't know you were chasing the same company, you wouldn't be successful, but together you are successful. But proximity matters. and you can't replace it.
So a follow-up question that Russell would be, and we struggle with this here as collaboration and the remote work from home, the younger people that are being mentored, our associates and everything else that we have. And then thinking about, okay, what do we want our space to look like and feel like? More of a feel. So I've been into some of these office spaces in South End that are newer, and you walk in and a lot of open space, a lot of different types of spaces for collaboration, whether it's an enclosed room with glass, so you're not behind glass that can be shaded with the whatever, and and then couches with benches, cafeteria style tables. I mean, I was in one office and it had all of those things, and it was like, okay, choose your adventure, and no differentiation between partners offices and associate offices. There may be some priority as to who gets, a window or a corner, so that way you have two sets of windows. But other than the more traditional rite of passage of getting into a bigger office seems to be fading. So what do you see as far as office reconfiguration and redesigned in light of wanting more collaboration, in-person collaboration, and creating an environment that encourages that and is what people want rather than being stuck in their offices?
I'm going to argue the exact opposite of what you just described.
Okay.
I think the open floor plan is dead.
Okay.
It was dying pre-COVID. The problem with the quote unquote collaborative space is that when you walk through collaborative space, everyone's got their headsets on. And the larger the headsets, the better, because they're trying to focus on their work, and everyone's having, and different people have a different perception of what's appropriate to talk about the office and not. I do think there will be more, I think break rooms will be bigger and probably more elaborate. But an interesting study, architects were doing studies on different generations. And the weird thing is Gen Z likes doors. Gen Z was raised by Gen X, and they see a door as what it has traditionally been, a status symbol. Being able to stand up and close your door and not listen to the chattering classes behind the door on the other side has always been a status symbol. And they see it that way as well. So it's interesting that there are some architecture firms that are still holding on to it. Post-COVID, the one interest, the one sort of commonality, because everyone's got different culture. When I started in real estate, law firms traditionally, we programmed them out at 350 square feet per person. That included cubes, that included break rooms, that included conference rooms, and a lot of that was conference rooms. Law firms have always traditionally been heavy conference rooms. Pre-COVID, it got down to 150 square feet per person. Still inclusive of all the ancillary uses. That's sardine level. That's packing people in to a point where they are uncomfortable and they were unhappy. And I think it's part of the reason why the Great Resignation happened is they have institutional knowledge in the back of their minds of what their office used to be. And I think that'll change. I have been of the opinion that we will wind up net identically on the square footage a couple of years from now as we were pre-COVID, because there's going to be doors and there's going to be more space. Whereas like some people were at like that bench seating. And I mean, at the very least, I think we're going to go back to individualized cubes. It's not an office, but at least it's your space. I could be wrong, but that's sort of what I've been saying for a couple of years, and I still think it's true. But every culture is different.
Yeah, you're right. It still comes down to your culture, because if you're trying to build a hip and cool space. And I've been in some that have the most amazing accoutrements, beautiful, caustic culture. They can't keep people because management sets the tone. It's a caustic culture, and it doesn't matter if you got bowling alleys or what else, it doesn't matter. So
well, that's a great
Joe,
point though, Gary. I just want to jump in on that real quick though. The biggest thing about bringing people to the office is you get to see firsthand what leadership does when no one's watching. And I think, in my opinion, that really sets the culture. It's the individual actions of leadership in the moments where where they don't know everybody's watching that really sets the tone. And you just can't do that remotely.
Yeah, that's interesting. So Joe, the focus group of one here, but he said NCR built a new showplace office in downtown Atlanta with an open concept, and it failed miserably. I'm curious as to when you say it failed, Joe, help us understand, like, people reacted and didn't like it, or I'm curious. Do you know anything about it, Russell?
I don't.
All right, well, Joe, if you can expand on that.
I know the Atlanta market,
but
not to that granularity.
Yeah. All right, cool. All right. Well, this has been fun. People didn't like not having the private space. Yeah. I got to tell you, I was at Bank of America in the tower when it was still Nations Bank. And I was in the corporate tower and a corner office, and it was there are 2 corner offices per corner in that tower. And then they built what was called the IJL building with the football crown at the top, which is now Fifth Third building. And we went from really cool offices to executives. and it was
executives.
And the status was, if you had a 6-foot cube, which I'm not 6 feet, so I couldn't see over it, then you were something. And so the SVPs, we got executives. Oh, man. But we did have a lot of good meeting spaces and that sort of thing in there. So it was, in some ways, it was more functional, but it's hard giving up a beautiful office for an executive.
It's also nice to, it's nice to have collaboration space. It's nice to have big break rooms. I mean, we're talking, the teaching the junior person, that Jack mentioned, junior associates in particular, they're just because you pass the bar doesn't mean you know how to practice law. And, it's really about the art of the occupation. It's an art of the job at that point. And, and the ability to just come and knock on someone's door. It's again, it goes back to the intangibility of the, it's the nuance of the office. I don't think it's going anywhere anytime soon.
Yeah, interesting. Well, as we're rounding up towards the top of the hour, any other questions out there? While we've got Russell Hughes, man, take advantage of it. Okay, you guys are hitting me in the chat. Hit me in the questions. But having private meeting/gathering/conference rooms are essential for mentorship programming. Spoken by a Gen Z. Right on, Caleb Gas. And he was talking about it. Caleb, is good to have you weigh in here. Yes, it is frosted glass, as Jack was talking about. I was like,
and they do some really neat stuff over at that over Caleb's company. If you want to make the conference room pop.
Yes, they do. Blue Fire Visual, also known as Heritage Printing and Visual Graphics, I think, or something, but they've rebranded to Blue Fire Visual, and they do some really good stuff. So yeah, So you get the shout out, Caleb, for participating and for doing great work out there. And it's cool that Russell knows about you too. Any other questions out there? Next week, you are not going to see this lovely face because I'm going to be at the beach with my wife. So we hit 39 years on Saturday, and dang, that's old. So anyway, I will be out next week, but Jack and Adam will cover it, and I'll be looking forward to watching the YouTube, maybe from the beach, if I have Wi-Fi coverage or cell coverage. So,
does Adam remember how to push the start button?
We'll have Jamie help him, and Chewbacca will be there. Oh, by the way, give us a Chewbacca sighting, Adam. I mean,
I think he got kicked out of the. Oh, he's right there.
Oh,
no. Gotta talk.
Evaluate real estate. It's serious. I mean, that really just does not ever get old.
No, it doesn't. Oh my gosh. All right. Any other questions? Last call before we shut her down. Anybody that came on here late? This is a picture of twins from 5 years ago. And what's funny is we're wearing the same shirts today. And that was August the 8th. And Andy Hilliard, Andy Hilliard was talking at the WeWork space. Yep. Remember? And yep. I saw that Andy Hilliard was on here today.
Is he?
Which is pretty cool. Yeah.
From Cali?
Yeah, he was on here. He dumped off. It's kind of like books with him. He starts a book and he talks about a book, and then he reads a book for about 5 pages, and then he gets bored with the book. So I think that's what happened. He dumped off of here already.
His ADHD is perfect for tech.
Yeah, it is. All right, guys. Well, thank you, Russell. You did a great job. And, the Coliseum is a perfect background for an 8-foot guy. Are they bringing in another leprechaun? We are a rare breed, Joe. Oh, too much. Jack and Adam, thanks so much. Always good to be with you guys. Have a wonderful rest of the week. Enjoy the day.
All right.
Thank you, guys.
See y'all.
Thanks,
Bye-bye.
guys.